A few weeks ago, we published a video about unsolved Mexican mysteries. The content was so well received that we decided to make a second part, as our nation continues to hide a vast number of cases within its history that have yet to find an answer. Today, we will narrate some of them for you. So, get comfortable and turn off the lights, because these are 7 unsolved Mexican mysteries. Part 2. How are you doing? Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Let's begin. Disappearances in the Chapultepec bathrooms. We begin this list with a very recent case that has put one of the most visited areas in Mexico City, Chapultepec Forest, in the crosshairs of many. Thousands of people pass through this place daily. Families, tourists, athletes, students, and more. It is for this reason that when someone disappears without a trace in such a spot, the situation becomes deeply disconcerting. On the 2nd of January 2025, a 59-year-old woman named Maria Virginia Gutierrez Juarez arrived in the city from Comala, Chiapas, to spend the New Year's holidays with her family. That day, they went to Chapultepec Forest to enjoy the final stretch of their vacation. At some point during the walk, Maria decided to go to the restroom, accompanied by her daughter, Gabriela. Both entered the public restrooms in the first section of the forest. According to what Gabriela later recounted, upon exiting, she noticed that her mother was taking a long time, so she began calling for her. However, she did not respond. She thought perhaps she had already left, even though she hadn't heard her at any moment, so she searched outside and asked the rest of the family, but they all said they had not seen her come out. The relatives began to scour the surroundings, but Maria was not there. She had vanished. Most unsettling is the fact that these restrooms have only one entrance and exit. There are no alternate access points, emergency routes, or rear exits. For anyone, even someone disoriented, leaving the place unseen would be extremely difficult. However, that is what apparently happened. Desperate, the family began walking the surroundings, including some streets adjacent to the forest, asking for help and inquiring about Maria. Yet, they found no answers. The authorities were notified, and the Mexico City Search Commission issued an official notice. It was detailed that Maria Virginia was wearing a long-sleeved black blouse, loose purple pants, black sneakers, and a brown cap. She had dyed red hair, scars on her arms, and several visible moles. But despite the outreach, there were no immediate breakthroughs. Gabriela then began spreading her mother's case through social media, mainly on TikTok, explaining that Maria suffered from epilepsy and required medication. Some media outlets began to mention that she also suffered from schizophrenia, but this was denied by her family. These videos quickly gained notoriety, and soon national media were talking about this strange disappearance. Finally, after 29 arduous days of searching, on January 31, Maria Virginia was located alive in a vulnerable state, sitting on a sidewalk in the Obrera neighborhood in the Cuauhtémoc borough. She was in such severe condition that, at first, she did not look like herself, but it was her. Apparently, the woman had walked from Chapultepec to the city center while disoriented. The news of her discovery began to circulate through a video where her daughter can be seen hugging her on the verge of tears after nearly a month of uncertainty. This brought relief to all those who followed the case closely. However, through comments on social media, users began to point out a strange pattern. This was not the first time something like this had happened, and dozens of people soon began to share their stories about disturbing experiences in this same area of Chapultepec Forest. However, what stood out most was the mention of one story and one person, Angel Fernando Castillo. On the 15th of November 2024, just a couple of months before Maria Virginia's disappearance, Angel, a 17-year-old student at UNAM's Preparatory School 4, went to the same forest with his girlfriend. At some point, he said he would go to the bathroom, but he never returned. His girlfriend tried calling him on his phone multiple times, but after receiving no response, she contacted Angel's family, who alerted the police. The Mexico City prosecutor's office then activated an Amber Alert. The file described Angel as a young man of slim build, light brown skin, straight black hair, and with distinctive marks. A tattoo of an eye on his right arm, scars on his face, eyebrow piercings, and an old scar on his leg. During the search, the young man's relatives began receiving extortion calls. Some people claimed to belong to criminal groups and demanded payment in exchange for information. Added to this were multiple rumors about alleged sightings of Angel outside the forest. However, just one day later, the young man's body was found lifeless under a pedestrian bridge on the Circuito interior, several kilometers from the forest. Engel was found lying on the lateral lanes, already without vital signs. And although the capital's police cordoned off the area, no clear information was issued regarding what had happened to him. The prosecutor's office reported that he was not the victim of a crime, but did not offer explanations regarding what the cause of his death had been. This caused an uproar, mainly from the UNAM University community, who demanded a transparent investigation. But to this day, this case remains unsolved. As we mentioned before, these two disappearances, which occurred in the exact same place, the restrooms of the first section of Chapultepec Forest, are extremely recent. Yet, both sparked a wave of reactions on social media where suspicions about what exactly is happening in that place have not stopped growing. And the question that remains unanswered is the same. How exactly did Maria Virginia and Angel Fernando disappear from those small restrooms without being seen by anyone? The lost treasure of Pancho Villa. Just like in the first part, when we spoke about the incredible story of Gil Perez, the soldier who teleported from the Philippines, this entry on the list is more legend than a real case. However, it is one so interesting and widespread that it is impossible to leave out. We refer to the supposed lost treasure of Pancho Villa, a story that, while not confirmed by any official discovery, has generated fascination for decades among historians, fortune hunters, and entire communities in northern Mexico. According to the legend, Francisco Villa, whose real name was José Doroteo Arango Arambula, managed to accumulate a massive fortune during his revolutionary campaigns. Part of that money came from raids on haciendas, banks, gold and silver convoys, and even forced loans imposed on businessmen and landowners. Over time, the so-called Centaur of the North allegedly hid part of that loot in various strategic points in the states of Durango, Chihuahua, Coahuila, and other regions of the country's north. These hideouts were intended to serve as emergency reserves so that Villa, who knew the region very well, could resupply in the middle of a conflict. Furthermore, keeping his treasure this way implied no real risk, as when he needed it, he knew exactly where and how to retrieve it. It is said that this treasure was comprised not only of weapons but also gold coins, silver ingots, and even crates with millions of pesos buried in caves, ravines, basements, and hidden walls. In some versions, it is even said that he had a map with the exact locations of his hideouts, which he personally ensured was destroyed before his death. One of the places that is repeated most in the different versions is the region known as La Laguna, especially in Torreon, Coahuila, a city that Villa took on at least 5 occasions between 1913 and 1916. Each time he entered, he looted banks, confiscated goods from landowners, and gathered businessmen on whom he imposed contributions. Although it is known that a portion of the money went toward maintaining his army and supporting the families of his soldiers, the doubt always remained as to where the rest went. And it was precisely that gap in history that gave rise to the myth. In Torreon, it is said that the treasure was buried at the Hacienda de la Loma, the place where Villa was named supreme commander of the Division of the North. There is also talk of the Cave of the Churches, where treasure hunters have dug with shovels, picks, and metal detectors. For decades, stories have circulated about people finding ancient coins or remnants of trunks, but to this day, no one has been able to prove they have found the famous loot. Other accounts claim that when he retired from armed struggle and settled at the Hacienda de Canutillo in Durango, Villa had a private room that he always kept locked. On one occasion, some children accidentally managed to enter, and upon discovering it, Villa supposedly decided to empty its contents immediately and leave toward Parral, accompanied by a small group of men who never returned. According to this version, he buried the treasure in a place called La Cabeza del Oso, the bear's head, and murdered his companions to ensure no one else would know the exact location. Other variations of the legend say that Villa left his fortune in some corner of the Sierra Madre Occidental, while there are those who believe that it is not even a single treasure, but several scattered throughout the north of the country. And not only that, many popular versions agree that the treasure would be protected by supernatural forces, who would continue to guard his secrets from the afterlife. Perhaps today, talking about one or several treasures hidden by Francisco Villa might sound somewhat fantastic. However, it is not as crazy a story as one might imagine. During the Mexican Revolution, many landowners hid their money and most valuable belongings out of fear of looting. They buried gold, jewelry, and coins in remote places, often without witnesses, which has led to the belief that even if the treasure weren't villas, some could well be buried under those lands. However, the reality is that, to date, the treasure has yet to appear. Even so, in the north of the country, especially in rural communities in Durango, Chihuahua, Sonora, and Coahuila, the story persists. Some still look for it as part of a tradition, others out of greed, and others still because they grew up hearing that perhaps beneath their feet, a lost fragment of the Mexican Revolution still rests. The UFO of Atlixco, Puebla. No list of mysteries would be complete without a UFO case, and the one we are about to discuss remains one of the most debated in the country's modern history. And it all happened just a few minutes from the city of Atlixco, in the state of Puebla. There exists a hill known as La Casita Blanca, a place that today houses a metallic structure in the shape of a flying saucer, a monument covered in graffiti and rusted by the passage of time that represents this incredible event. It all started on the 6th of August 1992. That night, dozens of people in the Metepec region, an auxiliary board of Atlixco, reported seeing strange lights in the sky. However, it was not a fleeting appearance. According to witnesses, this spectacle lasted at least 3 hours. The testimonies said that the lights crossed the sky in silence, moving at great speed, and at moments changed direction abruptly, as well as their color. Some claimed to have seen reddish and bluish spheres floating in complete silence over the hills, while others spoke of objects that moved as if they were searching for something. The experience was so shocking that many named it the Atlixco wave. That same year, engineer Norberto Gil Salgado, a pioneer in the observation of the UFO phenomenon in the region, began to document witness testimonies and record every sighting. It was he who consolidated the site as an important spot for nighttime observation. Shortly after, sightings became more frequent, and every night people gathered at La Casita Blanca with the hope of seeing this fascinating spectacle or something strange again. Over time, the story spread. There was talk of sightings in nearby towns like San Pedro Atlixco, San Baltazar at Limillaya, and even the Techolotl Hill, where some said the light appeared every night with punctuality, floated over the horizon, and then disappeared without a trace. This phenomenon attracted national attention. Reports appeared in newspapers, on television shows, and even in specialized magazines. Years later, in the year 2000, a monument in the shape of a flying saucer was placed at the top of the hill. The 8-meter diameter and 7-meter tall structure was manufactured with recycled tin from an old water tank from University City and designed by sculptor Ricardo Vivar Lepe. The intention was to pay homage to the testimonies and turn the place into a tourist symbol. And it certainly succeeded, as for years the site was a meeting point for believers, the curious, and fans of the unknown. Camping trips, bonfires, nighttime pilgrimages, and more were organized. There was even a time when microbuses taking visitors from Atlixco painted the word ovnibuses on their windshields. They also sold t-shirts, stickers, and even figurines with the image of the Atlixco UFO. Local authorities even recognized the site's attraction, and in 2022, to mark the 30th anniversary of the wave, they placed a commemorative plaque on the monument with the names of some of the first researchers of the phenomenon in this region. But it wasn't all about lights in the sky. As this case gained popularity, dozens of versions emerged about much closer encounters. Some spoke of thin, skeletal-looking beings moving inside the ships. Others even mentioned more elaborate figures like blonde, blue-eyed characters who supposedly shared agricultural knowledge with the locals. There were even accounts of people who claimed to have received messages for a greater mission. One of the most recognized characters in these stories was Paulino Lopez, a local restaurant owner who claimed to have been contacted by one of these beings, who taught him a formula to grow avocado trees with almost miraculous results. As time went on, his accounts changed. In one version, the visitor was an old man with a deep gaze. In another, a youth nearly 2 meters tall in a shiny suit with white skin. Paulino even showed a supposed ceramic figure with extraterrestrial features that, according to him, could not be photographed because the images would be erased. There was also talk of circles in the grass, of lights emerging from the graves of a cemetery, of vehicles that couldn't start in the presence of the object, and even of people who claimed to have lost several hours of their lives. After an experience with this supposed UFO, some ufologists and believers firmly defended the authenticity of these phenomena, and others, as always happens, offered somewhat more rational explanations. Researchers like Oscar Garcia and local journalists began to identify patterns. They noted that many of the sightings coincided with the flight path of the Huajotzingo airport. The lights seen in the sky could then have been airplanes, the photographs, long exposure traces, and the floating spheres, simply optical illusions caused by very specific atmospheric conditions. Even the famous Punto Marconi, a nearby area where objects appear to move uphill, ended up having an explanation, a slope of the terrain that simply deceives the human eye. Despite everything, the case of the Atlixco UFO has not lost strength. For some, the rational explanation will never be enough because beyond the evidence, there is something in that place between the hills, the wind, and the dark sky that continues to attract those who seek an answer. And although many no longer clearly remember what happened that night in 1992, the truth is that since then, there are those who continue to climb La Casita Blanca, hoping to see those strange lights in the sky again. The Witch of Monterrey. If you are a person born in the 90s or earlier, you surely remember one of the most famous paranormal cases in Mexican television, the Witch of Monterrey. And for those younger, perhaps this sounds like a story taken from an urban legend, but no. It was a case so massive and viral that it was covered by national media. It sparked surveillance operations, documentaries, and, most unsettling, a victim who continues to defend his story to this day. It all started in the early hours of the 16th of January 2004 in the municipality of Guadalupe within the Monterrey, Nuevo León metropolitan area. It was around 3:15 a.m. when Leonardo Samaniego, a police officer, was patrolling the Valles de la Sierra neighborhood. At that moment, upon turning onto Alamo Street, something strange fell from a tree in front of him. According to his account, the first thing he thought was that it was a black bag, but what happened next left him completely paralyzed. Before touching the ground, the object stopped in midair, floating. The officer braked his patrol car, turned on the high beams, and at that moment, he could clearly see what he had in front of him. A humanoid figure, apparently female, dressed in black with a cape and a hat that floated next to her as if held by some invisible thread. Samaniego said the figure covered herself from the light, but he could not prevent her face from being partially illuminated by the patrol car's headlights. That was when the officer could see two huge, completely black eyes with no trace of eyelids staring fixedly at him. "Every night I keep dreaming of those eyes," he declared years later in an interview. "Their gaze was deep. I wake up sweating and crying." But what was most disturbing is that, according to his testimony, the flying figure launched itself directly at the patrol car, impacting the windshield as if trying to catch him. Samaniego, completely terrified, backed up at full speed while calling for backup over the radio. The creature scratched the glass, and he could only think of fleeing. In his desperation, he lost control and crashed at the end of the street. He fainted, not from the impact, but from fear. Minutes later, other patrol cars and an ambulance arrived at the scene. They found him unconscious, and when he regained consciousness, he was still in a state of panic. Even so, he was able to recount what happened with clarity. He didn't stutter, he didn't ramble, he didn't hesitate. He was sure of what he had seen. A true horror story that was just the beginning. The story began to spread on television. He was interviewed in front of cameras shortly after the incident, and not only did he keep his composure, but he repeated every detail with exactitude. He was subjected to toxicological and psychological tests. All came back negative. Doctors, paramedics, and directors of the university hospital confirmed that he was in good physical and mental shape. Even the municipality's Secretary of Public Security and the Mayor of Guadalupe publicly backed Samaniego, ensuring he was a good officer with no history of erratic behavior and that there was no reason to doubt his version. And then the case grew like wildfire. Shortly after, other testimonies began to appear. 3 days before the event, 3 other officers from Santa Catarina, another municipality in the metropolitan area, reported having seen the same creature flying through the skies, but they decided to keep quiet until they saw Samaniego's case on the news. A neighbor named Norma Alicia Herrera also stated that she and her brother saw the creature during the day and that the witch's appearance was so shocking that her brother fell ill for a week. The story reached the ears of well-known journalist and ufologist Jaime Maussan, who decided to investigate the case and show the officer a series of images of the so-called Flatwoods Monster, a creature sighted in West Virginia, United States, in 1952. Samaniego's reaction was immediate. He said it was identical to what he had seen. Both figures shared disturbing traits. They floated, were hooded, had immense, dark eyes. They approached without making a sound, causing an immediate panic reaction in those who saw them. And the phenomenon did not end in 2004. 2 years later, on the 17th of May 2006, a group called OVNI Club Nuevo León, led by researcher Diana Perla Chapa, filmed a humanoid figure flying over the Cerro de las Mitras, one of the highest points in Monterrey. The video, recorded in broad daylight, shows a black figure floating slowly over the landscape as if defying the laws of physics. It was covered by a type of hood, with proportions similar to those Samaniego described. For many, that video was the visual proof that was missing. For others, it was nothing more than an optical illusion or a figure launched by some mechanism. The truth is that the case was never solved, and although some tried to discredit it, Leonardo Samaniego never retracted. Each time he has been interviewed, whether by television channels, national media, or documentaries like those on the History Channel, his story remains identical. Perhaps we will never know what exactly he saw that dawn or what appeared in the skies of Monterrey in 2006. But one thing is for sure. This story left a mark on the collective memory of an entire state. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to leave your like and a comment. Also, don't miss the rest of our content like Historias de Mundo Creepy, Noctilos Podcast, and Creepypastas de Mundo Creepy, all available both on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. So, subscribe and hit the notification bell to be one more inhabitant of this Mundo Creepy. The mystery of El Tapado. This is, without a doubt, one of the strangest, most fascinating, and most unsettling tales from the colonial era in Mexico. And of course, it has mysteries that, more than 340 years later, remain unsolved. It is a story that mixes imposters, political intrigue, inquisitorial processes, public punishments, and a solar eclipse at such a precise moment that it made an entire city panic. I am talking about the case of Antonio Benavides, better known as El Tapado, the Covered One. It all began in May 1683, in one of the most chaotic moments experienced by New Spain during the 17th century. That same month, the pirate Lorenzillo and his men had invaded and looted the port of Veracruz, leaving in ruins what was once a prosperous and protected city. The commotion was such that the viceroy ordered all men between 15 and 60 years of age to take up arms within a 2-hour deadline. The streets of the capital were filled with fear and tension, and in the middle of all this chaos arrived a man who claimed to come in the name of the king. His name was Antonio Benavides, and he presented himself as the Marquis of San Vicente, Field Marshal, Castellan of Acapulco, and visitor of the realm with direct authority from the Spanish crown. He arrived in Veracruz in an ostentatious caravan loaded with luggage, jewels, and documents that accredited him as a high-ranking official. In every city he passed through on his way to the capital, he was received with honors. Everyone treated him as if he had truly come to restore order in the name of the monarch. And for many, that was precisely what they feared most. Veracruz, Puebla, and Mexico City were filled with local authorities who trembled at the arrival of a royal visitor, since these figures had the power to review accounts, expropriate goods, and dismiss governors. Therefore, although everyone received him with festivities, in reality, they viewed him as a tremendous threat. But the problem arose when his documents were reviewed by the authorities. That was when they realized they could not verify their legitimacy. There was no official record of his appointment, and there existed no royal order to back his story. And thus, under suspicion of fraud, he was arrested in Puebla and, according to some versions, also accused of Judaism. At that time, it was said that his knowledge of Hebrew had given him away. In other versions, it is simply said that he was considered an impostor. From that moment, the people began to call him El Tapado because of his habit of always walking covered with a dark cape, but also because no one knew for certain who he was or why he was there. They then moved him in chains to the viceregal capital, where he was locked in a dungeon. He was interrogated again and again, but he never confessed anything. He maintained the mystery. It is said that when the viceroy himself visited him personally, he left the meeting visibly affected, without saying a single word about what they had talked about. The audience tried to wring a confession from him through torture, but not even then could they get an answer. El Tapado endured all the punishments in silence, even when he was on the verge of death. He spent a year in custody, and the case gradually fell into oblivion. But in July 1684, the sentence was finally handed down, death by hanging. And it is here where the story takes a legendary turn. On July 12, in broad daylight, hundreds of people gathered in the Plaza Mayor of Mexico City to witness the execution. That mysterious man, until the end, was taken to the scaffold with his head held high. No one still knew who he really was. And just when the executioner placed the noose around his neck, the sun eclipsed. The sky darkened suddenly. The horrified crowd believed that this was a kind of divine sign. They began to shout that an innocent man was about to be executed, that God was protesting. But even so, the sentence did not stop. El Tapado was hanged, and his body remained swaying on the gallows under the gloom of this mysterious eclipse. But as if that weren't enough, the strangest thing was yet to occur. After his death, his head was separated from his body and sent to the city of Puebla, where it was exhibited for 20 days in the atrium of the Church of the Company of Jesus. The strange thing here is that no one knows for certain why this was done. Some said it was to serve as a warning. Others believed it was a public humiliation by the clergy. Finally, due to the pressure from the Jesuits over the grotesque spectacle offered by a decomposing head, the authorities had to remove it, and its final destination remains a mystery. And to this day, no one knows who ordered this to be done. And more importantly, no one knows who El Tapado was. Some believe he was a spy sent by Queen Mariana of Austria. Others think he was a professional con artist who knew how to take advantage of the chaos of his time. There are those who also ensure that he was simply one more victim of the political and religious power of the era. What we do know is that he was a man who deceived half the viceroyalty, who never revealed his real identity, and who died without confessing either his origin or his mission. An imposter, a martyr, or an undercover agent who went down in history as one of the most enigmatic characters of colonial Mexico, and who, according to those who were present at the time, was executed just as the sun disappeared from the sky. The myth of Aztlán. This mystery has existed since before Mexico even carried that name, so including it on this list might seem like a cheat. But the story is so fascinating, symbolic, and deeply rooted in our identity that leaving it out would have been a mistake. We refer to Aztlán, the mythical place from which, according to legend, the Mexicas departed to undertake a journey of centuries that would culminate in the founding of Mexico Tenochtitlan, a site that appears in codices, chants, oral traditions, and in colonial documents, but whose real location remains a mystery. The myth narrates that in the year 1 Flint, equivalent to 1116, the Mexicas undertook a long pilgrimage from Aztlán, guided by their god Huitzilopochtli, with the promise that one day they would find a sign, an eagle devouring a serpent on a prickly pear, cactus nopal. When that occurred, there they should found their great city. That sign, as we all know, would become centuries later the national emblem of Mexico. But what of the starting point? Where was Aztlán really? For the Mexicas, Aztlán was the original land. Its name can be translated as place of the herons or place of whiteness, and it has been described as an island in the middle of a body of water, fertile, luminous, almost paradisiacal, the site where their ancestors lived before becoming warriors and founders of empires. So important was this mythical city that in the 15th century, Emperor Moctezuma Ilhuacamina ordered a group of priests and sorcerers to retrace the route of their ancestors to find Aztlán. It is said that they even used their powers to transform into ferocious animals in order to cross unknown territories. When they finally arrived, they were received by Cotlicu, mother of the god Huitzilopochtli, who blessed them and gave them sacred gifts to take back to Tenochtitlan. However, something became clear on that journey. Aztlán was not just a physical place, it was also a symbol, a promise, a spiritual origin. Since then, the enigma has persisted. Some researchers, like Eduardo Matos Moctezuma, maintain that Aztlán never existed as a real site, but was a symbolic construction intended to justify Mexica power and glorify their past. Others believe that it did exist, but its trail was lost with time. Even so, theories abound. One of the most popular is the one that points to Mexcaltitan, a small island town in the state of Nayarit, as the true Aztlán. This place possesses characteristics that coincide with the legend. It is surrounded by water. It has a circular layout with a large central plaza and connects by canals during the rainy season. It is known as the Mexican Venice, and its name can be interpreted as the House of the Mexicans. In the Museum of Origin, located on the island itself, There is a replica of a sculpture of a heron devouring a marine reptile. Some interpret this image as a possible confusion with the famous sign of the eagle and the serpent. Other theories situate Aztlán in different points of northern Mexico or even in the southern United States, in regions like Zacatecas, Sonora, Durango, or New Mexico, all with varying degrees of speculation, but without conclusive proof. And although no one has been able to find the location of this ancestral city with certainty, its legacy remains present. Because Aztlán not only represents the mythical origin of a people, it also symbolizes the search for identity, belonging, and connection with history. A place that perhaps existed or perhaps was dreamed, but that has managed to survive, not in geography, but in the memory of an entire country. The Conspiracy of Gabriela Rico. The case with which we close this list is very different from the others. It is not an ancestral legend, it is not a story from the colonial era, and it is not a sighting that can be explained with scientific theories. This occurred in the middle of the 21st century in an urban area, in front of witnesses, police, and cameras. And yet, to this day, it remains without an explanation. And the most unsettling thing of all is that no one knows what became of the protagonist, as she vanished completely. It was August 2009 when a young woman appeared in front of a luxury hotel in the center of Monterrey, Nuevo León. She was screaming desperately. She wore a torn blouse and had a distraught face. Her name, according to the official reports of the Info 7 news program, was Gabriela Rico Jimenez. She was barely 21 years old. The cameras captured her, demanding her freedom with insistence. She claimed to have been deprived of her liberty since the year 2001, and between screams, she accused figures of the highest profile, politicians, businessmen, and even international royalty. She spoke of murders, of cannibalism. She said the Queen of England ate human flesh, that Carlos Slim Domit, the son of the richest man in Mexico, knew everything that had happened to her, that they killed Juan Camilo Mourinho, the Secretary of the Interior, and that she knew who had been there. She even mentioned Mickey Mouse, as if trying to ridicule her denunciations by mixing them with absurd elements. She said they had eaten humans, that she didn't know anything about it, that yes, she knew about the murders, but not that it was cannibalism, and she repeated it with horror, that they were humans who smelled like human flesh. For several minutes, she refused to be detained by the police. She struggled, tried to bite an officer, and was finally put into a patrol car. And that was the last time she was seen. And it is in this way that one of the strangest and most disturbing cases in the history of modern Mexico is born. Gabriela was called a model by some media, but there is no evidence of a career in the modeling industry. Neither are there official records about her on social media or in public databases prior to the incident. Some bloggers claim to have seen her at exclusive parties and expensive hotels, and there are even testimonies of people who claim to know her from previous years. But all of this became merely anecdotal. What is real is the video, which was broadcast on national television and can still be found, although with some difficulty. In it, one can appreciate the level of desperation, the delirium, and also something difficult to explain, the way she repeats certain names, the horror with which she speaks, and the partial coherence of some statements. After this incident, unconfirmed versions circulated that she was taken to a psychiatric hospital in Monterrey in the Buenos Aires neighborhood. Other theories say that she was interned in Argentina in an institution called La Colonia. It has also been said that she was seen years later wandering together with an older man, disoriented, and without remembering who she was or where she lived. But none of these versions could be proven, and they still cannot. An anonymous testimony published on a blog said that Gabriela was taken to an unknown place shortly after her arrest, and that tall, well-dressed people removed all witnesses from the scene. The whistleblower, a law student who claimed to have been there for professional internships, stated that he tried to seek information, but was told that Gabriela never existed and that he didn't work there. Some say that all this was simply a psychotic break caused very likely by excessive drug consumption or undiagnosed mental illnesses. Others believe that she was a victim of human trafficking who was drugged and abused for years, and that, when she managed to escape and speak, no one wanted to listen. The most extreme argue that she was silenced for having spoken too many truths. Most of the people who saw this video in 2009 remember her. For some, she was just a crazy woman screaming in the street, but for others, it was the desperate message of a victim. The most unsettling thing is that, despite how shocking this case is, there is very little information available. The original video disappeared from various sites over the years. And if you go to research the name Gabriela Rico right now, the year, or even the place where this occurred, you will see that there is almost no media outlet talking about this. There are no reports, and practically no big media outlet picked it up. It is as if someone had decided to erase or ignore all the traces that lead to this story. The only thing that can be found are some fragments scattered in forums, blogs, and alternative channels that try to reconstruct what happened. But the reality is that today, more than 15 years after this occurred, the case of Gabriela Rico Jimenez remains wrapped in an unsettling silence. No one has found her, no one has confirmed if she is still alive, and the most chilling thing is that no one seems to be looking for answers. Gabriela vanished without a trace, as if the earth had swallowed her, as if she had never existed. And the truly disturbing thing is that any of the possible explanations, whether she was the victim of a powerful network, suffered a psychotic break, or her mind was broken by years of abuse and confinement, is equally hair-raising, because deep down, what is most frightening about this story is that the truth is there, but it remains hidden. And perhaps there is a person behind this and a chilling reason that would explain everything. Tell us, did you know all these mysteries? Which of the possible explanations we presented do you think might be the answer for some? Let us know all about it down in the comments, as we will be delighted to read you. And remember to follow us on all social networks, on all our channels, and don't miss any of the content we have prepared for you. Without further ado, I bid you farewell. See you next time.